Hi, Steve Gale here. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to create a VPC, a public subnet, and a private subnet in AWS Cloud. And we're going to launch a web application server that is being firewalled inside of a security group according to this diagram here. So you can see here that we've got in our VPC, which is, we're only going to use one availability zone. And inside that availability zone, we're going to have our public subnet, which is going to have an IP address of 10.0.0.0/24, and a private subnet, which is 10.0.2.0. It actually says /23 in here, but I'll make that /24 as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to attach an internet gateway to the VPC, and then through the public subnet, our application server will be able to gain web access. And but because we want to secure the application server, we're going to use a security group where we'll only allow access via the internet from port 80. So that's what we're going to do. So let's get started. So the first thing I will do is I will go to VPC and I'll create a virtual private cloud. So we could launch the VPC wizard, but I'd like to do this from first principles. So let's go to VPCs and we'll go create VPC. And I'm just going to call this my VPC. And for a CIDR block, I'm going to use 10.0.0.0, and I'll do a /16. So by using /16, it means that I can further provide subnets in the /24 using /24 in the 10 network. So I'm not going to use IPv6, and I'll use the default tenancy and name my VPC. That's fine. So I've got a tag there for with my VPC as the name, and I'll create that VPC. Okay, so we can see that the VPC has been created. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the subnets. So I'll go into subnets and I'll go create subnet. And first of all, I'm going to select my VPC, just 10.0.0/16. And I'll call this my public subnet, and availability zone, I'll just choose East 1A. And for my CIDR block, I'll make this 10.0.0.0/24, which will be my first subnet in that range. And you can see here it's got my public subnet as the tag, the key value pair, and that's fine. So what I'll do is I'll create that subnet. Now, while I'm here, I might as well create the private subnet as well. So just going back to my diagram, you can see that I've got a public subnet 10.0.0.24, and I'll make my private subnet, but I'm going to make that 10.0.2.0/24. So let's make that one as well. So let's go create subnet and select again my VPC. So this is my private subnet, and availability zone, I'll keep it in 1A, same availability zone, and this is 10.0.2.0/24. Yep, that's good. And this is my private subnet, and I'll create that. So I've created my two subnets. Okay, so let's go and have a look at my subnets. So you can see here that I've got, if I do a refresh on this, and clear the filters, and you can see here I've got my private subnet and I've got my public subnet. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow down here. So the next thing I'll do is I'll look at route tables. So you can see here that if I look at my VPC, I've got my VPC here, and I've got one route table, and this route table will be the main route table, which will be my private route table. So let's have a look at this one, and what I'll do, it's got main equals yes. So I'm just going to go in here, and I'm just going to say private route table. And save. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another route table. I'll create route table, and I'll make this my public route table. And I want to use the same VPC, which is my VPC, and my public route table, and I'll create that one. And that's been created. So let's have a look now. So if we have a look at route tables, I should use the same terminology. I'll just make that my private route table and save that. Got my private route table and my public route table. So I've got my two route tables. I'm going to come back to these route tables, but before I do, I'm going to set up an internet gateway. So let's go and set up our internet gateway. And there's no internet gateway, so I'll go create internet gateway. And this can be my AGW, and that'll be fine, and create internet gateway. And notice it's detached. So what I need to do is I need to attach it. So I'm going to access and I'll attach to VPC, and I'll select my VPC here, and I'll attach the internet gateway to my VPC. So what I've done now is I've got, what have we got? We've got our VPC 10.0.0.16. We've got our public subnet, we've got our private subnet, and we've got our internet gateway. So the next thing we can do is that if we had an application server in our private subnet, we would need a NAT gateway. So what I might do is I might create a NAT gateway, and what we'll do is we'll put the NAT gateway in the public subnet, so that if we were to run an instance in the private subnet, that instance in the private subnet would then gain internet access. So I'll do that now. So let's have a look at NAT gateways and create a NAT gateway. And my NGW will do. Create a subnet. Select the subnet in which to create the NAT gateway. So I need to put this in my public subnet because my public subnet is going to have internet access. So I'm going to put it in my public, and it's a public connectivity, so it's public connectivity. Now I need to allocate an elastic IP to that. So I'll allocate an elastic IP to my gateway, and you can see here we've got an elastic IP there. And I'm happy with the tag there. So I'm going to create that NAT gateway. So with my NAT gateway, any instance in the private subnet will be able to gain access to the internet, but any instance in our public subnet will use the internet gateway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, and so I'll click on this and I'll go to routes, and I'll edit routes here. And my public route table, what I want to do is I want to add a route to the internet gateway. So this is my public route table. So add a route 0000, and I'm going to select internet gateway there. And that's my internet gateway, and I'm going to save those changes. So what I've done, let's have a look at my diagram here. So what I've done is I've connected via my public route table to the internet gateway, but what I need to now do is associate the public subnet with this public route table. So I'm going to go to subnet associations, and I'm going to edit subnet associations. And because I'm talking about my public route table with the internet gateway, I'm going to associate my public subnet, and I'll save that association. Okay, so because this one's associated with my VPC, This is my public route table. Yep, and this is my private route table. What I'll be able to do is I'll be able to add my NAT gateway to my private route table with a bit of luck. So let's go to this one. Let's go to routes. Let's go to edit routes and add a route and default route and NAT gateway. And finally, it's found my NAT gateway. Okay, so we'll save the changes. And so what have we done now? Let's have a look. Let's go back to our diagram. So we've created our VPC 10.0.0/16. Inside of that, we've got a public subnet 10.0.0/24 and a private subnet 10.0.2.0/24. And we've set up an internet gateway, which is associated with our public subnet. We've also got a NAT gateway, which is not on the diagram here, but that's sitting in our public subnet, but it's for internet access from our private subnet. So the next thing we're going to do is create a security group, which will allow port 80 access to an application server. And then after that, we'll fire up an EC2 instance and we'll test that everything is functioning correctly. So let's go and have a look at security groups. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a security group and I'll call it my security group and allow port 80. Oops. Allow port 80. We want to make sure it's using my VPC. And we need an inbound rule, so let's add a rule. Let's add, this is for inbound traffic. So we want to allow HTTP here, which is port 80, and from anywhere, 0000. And our outbound rule, we'll leave our outbound rule by default. So inbound by default, nothing comes in, so we have to add a rule. Whereas outbound, we've got by default, all traffic can go out, and that's fine. Bearing in mind that these are stateful, if we allow traffic in, then statefully the return traffic would be allowed out by the state of the inbound rule. And create security group. So now I've got our security group. So finally, what we're going to do now is, it's our diagram. We're going to create our application server, just a Linux EC2 instance. T2 micro will be fine. And we're going to put that in the public subnet. We're going to secure it via the security group, and we're going to set it up as a web server, and then we'll test that we can connect to it. So let's go to now navigate to the EC2 console. I'll open that new link over here. And we'll go to instances, and we've got nothing running. So let's go to launch an instance, and we'll just use the Linux AMI. So let's select that, and we'll just use T2 micro free tier. Yep, and configure instance details. So here I want to make sure it's in my VPC, and I want it in the public subnet. Let's just check that. Yep, so we're putting it in the public subnet, and we're going to put it inside the security group. Auto assign an IP. Let's enable that. Let's assign it a public IP, and that public IP will be internet accessible via the internet. And so what else have we got down here? So nothing else we need. Network interfaces, advanced details. We want to set it up with a user data script. So I've got a user data script here, and let's just copy that and let's just paste that in there. We'll just have a quick look at it. So what we're going to do in a user data script is we're going to do an install of Apache, PHP, and MySQL. So we're going to set up a LAMP server. Then we're going to do a wget and get some web files to render back to our client. Then we're going to unzip those into var www.html, so the root of the Apache web server. Turn the server on, and then start the Apache web service. So this user data script will run when the every time the instance fires up. So let's just go to storage, and we'll just use default storage, which is GP2, 8 gig of storage. That'll do. Do we need to add any tags? No. Configure security group. So we've already got a security group. So let's select an existing security group, and we'll use my security group here, which will allow port 80 coming in. Yep, that looks good. So let's go to review and launch. And a bit of warning to say that we can't SSH in, but that's okay. We just want to do a web test. So otherwise we'd need to open up port 22 so that we could remotely manage the box, but we don't need that. This example. And there's all our details. And let's go to launch. And we'll just choose the existing, that'll do. Don't need a key pair, but we'll just say yes anyway. And let's launch the instance. So let's go to view instances, and we'll see that this instance will be firing up. So that instance is now running. So let's click on the instance ID, and we can get some information about the instance. You can see here it's got a public IP address. So let's copy that public IP address, and let's see if we can HTTP into that instance. So I'll just open a new window, http:// paste the value, and with a bit of luck, yes, and yep, we get our the content that we've uploaded by the user data script running in our instance. So that finalizes the demo. Let's just have a look at what we've done. So what we've done is we've set up a VPC, a virtual private cloud, inside of a single availability zone, US East 1, and we have a VPC is 10.0.0/16. We set up a public subnet. We also set up a private subnet. We set up an internet gateway for internet access for our application server. We set up a security group where we're only allowing port 80 access to our from the internet to our application server, and obviously the return traffic can come back as well. The other thing we also did was we set up a NAT gateway inside of our public subnet, which would give any instance that we put in the private subnet internet access. So that rounds up the demo. Thanks very much for watching.